Escape from Stalingrad Z is back and reloaded with a new retail price, new dashboards, weapon and gear markers, and all new components compatible with Escape from Project Riza and future releases. I'm Lee, and I'll be taking you through a complete how to play video, going through all the rules that have been updated for Escape from Stalingrad Z. Here we go then, here's the new Escape from Stalingrad Z Reloaded box set, and this is going to give you everything you need to play the game. If you're just looking to get the updated and errata fixed copies of both the rules and scenario books, that's going to be an option as well, so you can still use the components from your original box set, but in this video I'm going to be using all of the new tokens, dashboards and components that are included in the Reloaded box set. As I go through the rules, you'll notice that these tokens are resized. They're going to be compatible with Escape from Project Riza, which is awesome, but we're still going to get that great artwork and all the characters we loved from the original. I can't wait to dive back in and play the scenario, so let's get started with the core concepts of the game. Many rules in Stalingrad Z use the term adjacent. A zombie is adjacent to a character if it is in one of the 4 squares to the immediate left, right, in front of, or behind the character. We're not including diagonal here. The dice you'll be using in the game are 12-sided dice. They're going to be referred to as D12s. Facing is really important in the game, and our characters have a blue hue around their tokens, which denotes the direction they're facing in. But we don't need to worry about zombies, they'll face in all directions. As well as tokens, you'll have the option to use the standees or the plastic miniatures. You're going to be using lots of markers during the game, including status markers, and these are going to be stunned and locked. You're going to need a team control sheet. This is where you record all your characters, experience points and much more, and there's a downloadable PDF version available for free. Now let's have a look at the character dashboards, and this is where you'll keep track of a character's skills, health, fatigue and gear during the game. At the top here you'll notice you've got the ready weapon and you've also got the off-hand weapon. This is where you'll place your weapon markers that you're currently wielding. Weapons can be one or two-handed. Next we've got supplies, and this is where you'll keep track of all your supplies including grenades, ammo, food and medkits. With these new dashboards you can place tokens, or I like to use these dry whiteboard markers to fill out and then simply erase when you lose each supply. Next up are the gear slots. This is where you can keep additional weapons and things you've scavenged along the way. You'll see at the bottom of the dashboard are your skills. This is your character's unique skills which unlock as they gain experience. Health is placed at the top, and here you'll keep track of your health. When you hit 0, your character will turn into a zombie. And finally, you've got your fatigue tracker to track your character's fatigue. Your characters will start with nothing but the clothes on their backs. As they search, find and scavenge for gear and weapons, you can add them to the dashboard. Now we're ready to look at how to set up a scenario. Here we've got the first scenario called Furchtbar. At the top of each scenario, you'll get an introduction text that sets the narrative and the scene for the scenario. Then you'll see over here, you've got the forces. This tells you what figures will be used. Then we've got the setup. This details where the figures and markers are placed on the map. And all you need to do is simply follow the instructions, placing the characters and the doors and everything else it instructs you to do on the map. Next up we've got objectives, and so we're going to place objective markers where it tells us to in the section here. You're going to get the main objective and the secondary objective. Over to the right you'll see the spawn rules, and this tells us when and where a zombie will spawn on the map. And you can see here we've got an S laid out in one of the squares. The things to remember section's really helpful, giving you some useful information to help you play the scenario. You've also got this section here telling you what you can find. I like to place the little tokens over the pictures. And then here we have the exit. We're going to read this after you've successfully completed the scenario, and that's going to give you some more instructions. Now we can set up our dashboard. I'm going to use my whiteboard marker just to add my health And I'm going to place a marker on 0 for fatigue. Then I'm going to put that dashboard right next to the book. Now we're going to look at the first scenario, which tells us to place 4 beta zombies. We always put them face down, and then we're going to place the round tracker on the first space of the round track. We need somewhere to put our zombies once they've been taken out, so we're going to set up a little discard area. Now we've gone through all the instructions for the scenario, we've placed all the tokens, characters, doors and more where we're supposed to, we've got our dashboard ready, and we know where to put the zombies once they're dispatched. So now let's have a look at the scenario structure, and that's going to start with rounds. And the game's going to play out in a series of rounds, which are broken up into different segments. Let's look at the initiative segment first. And for this, we're going to roll 1d12 for both the player and the zombies. The zombies will receive -4 to their roll, and that's going to give them a disadvantage as the higher roll gains the initiative and chooses who will take the first turn. Here Till has rolled an 11, and so he's going to choose to go first in this case. But if the zombies were to win, then they would always choose to go first when playing in solo mode, which is what we're going to be covering throughout this rules video. In the event of a tie, then simply roll off again. Now we're on to the turn segment, which is divided up into the start phase, the action phase, and the final phase. In the start phase, on the player's turn, remove covering and attacked markers from their characters. In the action phase, we're going to activate each of the figures, and for players, it's in an order of their choosing, but for the zombies, it will be the zombie closest to a character. In the character's action phase, when the character is activated, the player must declare if the character is stationary, walking, running, or performing a special action. Characters can move and carry out a single attack action. Then during the zombies action phase, you're going to activate non-stunned zombies one at a time, starting with the zombie closest to a character. Stunned zombies do not activate, instead, just remove the stun token and move on to the next zombie. Next we've got the final phase, and during the zombie turn, zombies are spawned in this phase. And finally we've got the end segment. Here we advance the round tracker on the round track by 1. Now we know how to play a scenario, let's look at movement. Let's mix it up and use the standees for this segment. Characters receive movement points, and only activated characters may spend these movement points. If they walk, they'll have 4, they run, they'll have 8, but if they're stationary and perform a special action, they'll receive no movement points. A character may perform as many movement actions as their movement points will allow in any order. Some things cost extra movement points, like hindering terrain. These are going to be outlined in yellow on your maps. They cost an additional 1 movement point to move on to or cross. Characters may not move through walls, closed doors, or anywhere else on the map that shows a solid barrier or squares outlined in red. Characters may not move through a space occupied by another figure, and that'll be either a character or zombie. When moving diagonally, at least one of the adjacent squares being moved past must be unobstructed, unoccupied, and not in a zombie zone of control. We'll be covering that later on, and just note that it costs 1 movement point to exit a map. Characters are allowed to pass weapons or gear to another character at the cost of 2 of their movement points. Pass weapons can be readied immediately for free, potentially swapping out an already readied weapon, but only the passer spends the movement points. A character may pick up gear that is in plain sight for 1 movement point if they're walking, or 2 if they're running. If a weapon's picked up, the character may ready it in either the main or offhand for free. Characters can move onto a fire square, but this is going to cause them to take 1 wound, but they cannot finish their activation on that square. The movement table is going to come in really handy, and it's going to help you to know exactly how many movement points to spend when walking and running. If you move 1 space forward, that's going to cost you 1. If you turn 90 degrees, that's either 1 or 2. And then as you can see, as we work through, going backwards, forwards, diagonally forwards, diagonally backwards, opening and closing doors, going through hindering terrain, switching weapons, passing gear, and picking up gear is all going to give you a different movement point cost. You can also carry out special actions. These are only possible when specified by a scenario, and a character who's performing a special action may not perform any movement or attack actions. Instead, they spend their entire activation performing that special action. Characters must be on or adjacent to the designated square to perform the special action, in this case a search. Sometimes a search may result in a zombie appearance. If so, place the zombie marker on the closest available unhindered or unobstructed square. Takes us nicely on to zombies, so let's have a look at the zombie turn, starting with revealing zombies. Zombie markers are placed face down, but they're flipped, revealing the zombie as soon as they're in line of fire of a character. When unrevealed, the zombies will be treated as beta zombies for movement purposes. Zombies are spawned or placed on the map in the final phase of the zombie turn when the current round space on the round track shows a spawn location. When this occurs, draw from the zombie pool and place a face down zombie marker on each matching spawn location on the map. Now here you can see that Till is got line of fire on this zombie marker, so we're going to flip it, revealing that it's a beta zombie. As tempting as it is, zombie markers should not be looked at and are always placed face down so the player doesn't know their identity until it's revealed. However, some scenarios may instruct you to place a specific zombie that was set aside during setup. If you need to spawn a zombie and there are none left in the zombie pool, take all the zombie markers in the discard pile, shuffle them, and place them face down into the zombie pool again. If none remain in the discard or pool, then just skip the spawn. If a spawn location is already occupied by a zombie, place the spawning zombie face down off the board near the spawn location. As soon as that location is empty, you can place the waiting zombie there. Sometimes you'll even find a queue of zombies waiting to get in on the action. If a spawn location is occupied by a character, the character takes 1 wound and the zombie waits off map as per rules for a zombie occupied spawn location. Here all the zombies are in Till's line of fire, so let's look at how we activate them. And we're going to activate each zombie one at a time, starting with the one closest to a character. But do not activate zombies with no path to a survivor. This one's blocked by the door. When activating a zombie, first complete its movement and then its attacks, if any. When a zombie that's already stunned activates, remove their stun marker. No movement or attack is allowed. Let's look at zombie movement, and zombies will target any survivor on the map, but a zombie will not move if already adjacent to a survivor. Zombies can move up to the number of squares equal to their move statistic in any direction, including diagonally. Each square moved only counts as 1 for each zombie, and a zombie will always move towards the closest survivor, which is the survivor that can be moved adjacent to in the smallest number of moves. Zombies are pretty clumsy and may not move through obstructing or hindering terrain. A zombie can only move diagonally if at least one of the adjacent squares it is moving past is empty. Here it's blocked, so this zombie would not be able to make this move. Zombies may not open doors, and they will not move diagonally across the corner of a fire square. And finally, a zombie will not move if there are no unobstructed paths to a survivor. For example, if the zombie shut in a room behind a closed door. Determine where the zombie goes by first moving adjacent to a survivor, secondly, move diagonally adjacent to a survivor, and thirdly, move towards the closest survivor using the shortest path. Now let's look at the zombie zone of control, and a character must stop when their move takes them into any square adjacent to a non-stunned zombie. a zombie's 4 adjacent squares are classed as its zone of control. When this happens, the character may use any unused movement points they have left over to change the facing direction. The character may still attack the zombie, and if the zombie is stunned or killed, continue taking movement actions normally. Already stunned zombies do not hinder character movement. If a character is activated already in a zombie's zone of control, they may move out of it normally, unless they're locked by the zombie. The zone of control is only triggered by a character moving into it. Characters may not move diagonally between 2 zones of control. The rules we've covered so far will take you through scenario 1, but now we're going to move on and have a look at combat, which is needed for the subsequent scenarios. Here I've set up the next scenario, Wake Up, Time to Die. We've got Till ready to go. We've got our zombies. This time some are already placed on the map. We've got 2 objectives, which are 2 different weapons. And we've got our zombie pool, which is looking pretty full. When a character is activated, it may use an attack action before, during, or after its movement. The character will select normal fire, spread fire, hand-to-hand combat, or grenade attack. They'll select a readied weapon suitable for the attack type to attack with, and in this example, Till has already picked up the knife and the Luger. With our readied weapon ready to go, we resolve the attack and place an attacked status marker next to our character to show they have attacked. If a character with an attack action has not used it when you choose to end their activation, place the appropriate covering status marker next to the character. Now let's look at resolving an attack. So first up, we determine the target of the attack, and this must be the closest zombie in the character's front arc that the character has line of fire to. Next, we determine range and calculate attack modifiers, which we'll be covering in a little while. Then we roll a number of d12 equal to the rate of fire of the weapon being used in the attack. Let's look at arc of fire next, and a figure will have 4 arcs of fire, front, right, left and rear. These are 90-degree arcs, but a figure may only attack within its front arc. There is an exception though, and that's for throwing grenades. Remember that zombies have no facing, that also means they have no arc of fire. You'll find a useful diagram in the reference guide and the core rulebook, and I've also laid out here using dice just to show you on the book how big the arc of fire is during gameplay. Now let's look at line of fire, and this determines whether there is an unobstructed path between 2 figures. To determine line of fire, trace a straight line from the centre of the attacking figure square to the centre of the target figure square. Line of fire is blocked by obstructive terrain such as doors, walls, pillars and stacked crates, but note the corners do not affect line of fire. Intervening figures do not block line of fire, but will make it harder to hit the intended target. When attacking past a figure, a natural roll of a 2 on the d12 signifies that the first intervening figure gets hit instead and takes 1 wound. When attacking, determine the range by counting the number of squares from the attacking character to the target figure, including the target square but not the firing figure square. When calculating range, any diagonals count as 2, just as they do when moving. Now we know how to make shooting attacks, let's have a look at the weapons and characteristics. Here you can see we've got 6 characteristics on our weapon. The first is rate of fire, and this tells us the number of d12s to roll when attacking. For the Luger, in this case, it's 1. Next we have the asterisk, and this indicates a one-handed weapon. 2 weapons may be readied, 1 in the offhand if both show the asterisk. Then we've got the stun wound values. These are the numbers you'll need to roll equal to or higher than on d12 to stun or wound your target if it's within range of the weapon. You also have a H2H stun wound value. This is the hand-to-hand stun wound value. The numbers you need to roll equal to or higher than a d12 to stun or wound your target in hand-to-hand combat. For the Luger, the hand-to-hand and the shooted stunned wound values are the same. Next we've got the range modifier. Here we're going to add +1 to your attack modifier each time you increase the weapon's range past point blank range by this amount. And finally we've got point blank range. Any target within the indicated range is considered to be at point blank range. The accuracy of a weapon begins to drop when attacking targets outside of the point blank range. This varies by weapon type, so you'll find the range modifier will be different for different weapons. Now let's look at modifiers. A positive modifier makes it harder to hit a target, while a negative modifier makes it easier. Modifiers are cumulative and applied to the weapon's stun wound values prior to rolling the attack dice. Here you can see we've got attack modifiers for things like stun zombies, spread fire, whether our figure is stationary, walking or running, whether they've walked and then are covering, ran a covering, or using an offhand weapon. A character may also have modifiers from the dashboard, for example when fatigued. You'll also need to take into account line of fire modifiers. These are going to represent adjustments for intervening terrain and figures that hinder but not block a character's line of fire to the target. Now let's look at the attack dice, and in this example we're not going to add any modifiers. Till is going to be using the Luger to attack the Alpha, who's well within the point blank range. With no modifiers, if Till rolled a 6, that would be enough to stun the Alpha. If Till rolled a 9, then that would be enough to cause 1 wound. Now the Alpha has 2 wounds, so he's just going to get a wound token. But as he's not eliminated, he's also going to receive a stun marker. If the zombie was a beta zombie, that 1 wound would be enough to eliminate the zombie. It would be removed from the battlefield and placed in our zombie discard pile. If Till was unlucky and rolled a 1 while performing a normal fire or spread fire attack, he'd have to reduce the ammo by 1. If a 2 was rolled and there was an intervening figure in the line of fire, the first intervening figure would take 1 wound. This can only occur once per attack action, regardless of how many 2s are rolled. Let's look at some other attack types, and we'll start with hand-to-hand combat. Weapons like the axe are specialised for hand-to-hand combat. They'll have a H where the RM is usually shown. Hand-to-hand attacks never consume ammo, so you may perform an attack even if you have 0 ammo. Hand-to-hand weapons have a point-blank range of 1 or 2. A point-blank range of 1 allows hand-to-hand attacks in a square directly in front of the figure, but a range of 2 allows you to attack diagonally adjacent enemies in your front arc or 2 squares directly in front of your character. When using a non-specialised weapon in hand-to-hand combat, you have a range of 1 and only roll 1 attack die, ignoring the weapon's printed PBR and ROF. Sometimes you'll be unarmed, and when an unarmed character is in combat, it has a hand-to-hand stun wound characteristic of 10 and 12 respectively. Shortly we're going to look at some more special attacks, but first let's look at zombie attacks. A zombie will attack if it is activated adjacent to a survivor or moves adjacent to a survivor and has moves remaining. The zombie will only make 1 attack against a single adjacent survivor, and if a zombie attacks a locked character, they inflict 1 wound on them. If a zombie attacks a civilian or soldier, they eliminate them. If a zombie attacks a character who is not already locked in hand-to-hand combat, they will lock the character into hand-to-hand combat. Place a red locked status marker between them. If a zombie has multiple targets, they'll always attack a locked character in preference to an unlocked one. A zombie that has locked a character will not damage any character this round, and the character will automatically face the zombie when it is locked. When a zombie is stunned, it loses any lock it had. Likewise, if a zombie is killed, any lock it has is removed with it. When activated, a locked character must immediately declare its movement option and attempt to break out of the lock. If they fail to break the lock, they cannot spend any movement points or attack. To test whether they break the lock, use the same process as resolving a hand-to-hand attack. If you roll at least the modified stun value, the lock is broken, and the character may move and attack this round. Note that this does not count as your attack and cannot stun or wound the zombie, it only breaks the lock. You'll find there are different types of zombies in Stalingrad Z, and each zombie will have a move, attack, and health characteristic, as well as special powers. Use these characteristics and special powers when carrying out any attacks. With all these rules, you're now ready to move on to Scenario 3, so let's look at some special attacks, starting with covering. Covering attacks may take place at any point during the round, including the zombie turn. A figure that does not use its attack while activated is placed on covering, and you'll place a covering marker with the appropriate modifier next to the covering figure. A covering figure can select normal fire, spread fire, hand-to-hand combat, or even a grenade attack, and the covering attack uses normal combat rules. Once a covering figure fires, it loses its covering status, and the marker is replaced by an attack marker. Becoming locked causes a figure's covering status to be lost. Replace the covering marker with an attacked marker. Likewise, a locked character does not gain a covering marker at the end of their activation. Now let's look at spread fire, and this allows for a character's attack to be split across multiple targets. We always have to apply a +1 attack modifier, and like a normal fire attack, the attacker must initially target the closest enemy. Then, after rolling and resolving the first attack die, regardless of its outcome, the attacker may change their target to any figure adjacent or diagonally adjacent to the previous target, even if it's not the closest enemy to the attacker. As per the normal rules, recalculate your attack modifiers before rolling each die, taking into account the change of target. Now let's look at grenade rules, and the grenade attack type is used when throwing an area of effect weapon. These include grenades, satchel charges, and molotovs. Grenades don't consume ammo. Instead, when the attack is complete, reduce your supply of grenades by 1. First we need to select a target square in the thrower's front or side arc. Here, Till has got a grenade, and he's able to throw this within a maximum range of 8 within his line of fire, but he doesn't have to throw it towards the closest target. Now we determine the number we'll need to roll to successfully land the weapon on the target square. This will be the range of the target square plus any attack modifiers except line of fire and ranged attack modifiers. Now we roll 1d12. If our roll is equal or greater than the calculated number, in this case 4, you land the explosive in the target square. Otherwise, it will deviate. And now we'll need to use this deviation chart. We roll 1d12, and on a roll of 1 to 8, shift the target square as indicated on the thrown explosive deviation chart. We've rolled a 3, so we'll move it 1 square to the right. If we rolled between a 9 and 12, the thrown explosive deviates 2 squares instead of 1, and we have to roll 1d12 again to determine the direction. In this case it's a 6, so we move 2 squares diagonally left and down. If the new target square is occupied by obstructed terrain, we'd re-roll the deviation check from scratch from the target square. With a roll of 2, we can now move to an unoccupied square. With grenades, we've got the option to throw the grenade without line of fire. You cannot throw a grenade through obstructed terrain, so when calculating the range to the target square, you must trace a path that goes around it. There's a penalty though, as an attack modifier of +4 applies when targeting a square the character doesn't have line of fire to. Now we roll to see if it lands, and in this case it does. But now let's move on and see how to resolve our explosive attack. So this grenade has landed successfully on a square occupied by a zombie. We now resolve an attack against all figures within the blast range and line of fire of the target square by rolling attack dice equal to the ROF of the weapon against each. Line of fire is measured from the target square. Blast range calculations do not include the target square, but does include the attacked figure square. If the explosive attack targets an unrevealed zombie, reveal the zombie so you can assess any impact to the attack modifier and attack effects. Against human targets, a stun result from an explosive is considered a wound. That covers the special attacks. Now let's look at earning experience. And experience is a measure of a hero's growing skills, confidence and abilities represented by the awarding of points known as experience points or XP. XP is cumulative and may be spent in between scenarios to unlock skills. Keep a record of your character's XP on the team control sheet and dashboards. That's now covered everything you need to know to play Stalingrad Z. From page 44 onwards in the core book, you'll find more about your team and using the team control sheet as you advance through the campaign. There's also a detailed armory going through all the different gear that you can find. You've got extra rules for versus play if you want to venture outside of solo, and you'll find written entries that add narrative to each of the scenarios. You'll also find some extra scenario rules at the back of the book. The 100-page scenario book gives you over 45 scenarios and maps to play. And as you'll see in the Gamefound campaign, you'll have the option to purchase 12 more scenarios with the new expansion. I'll put a link to the Gamefound campaign in the description below. I hope you found this video helpful, and now you've got everything you need to know to play your first game of Escape from Stalingrad Z. These new updates to the Reloaded edition gives you everything you love from the original game, but now all packed together in a more affordable price, with updated tokens that are compatible with Escape from Project Reza and upcoming expansions. The Gamefound campaign goes live on Tuesday the 15th of April. I'll put a link in the description down below where you can have a look at all the stretch goals, the different options for things like stretch pay, and you can see new content like the Rommel zombie miniature. There are also some new sculpts that have been made for 4 of the awesome characters, Till, Dasher, Katyusha and Steiner, and they've even made some of the plastic doors as well if you want to upgrade from the cardboard ones. A massive thank you to the team at Raybot Games for sending me out the box set in advance so I can share it with you and give you a good look at everything you can expect from this new reloaded version. I'd love to hear what you think about Escape from Stalingrad Z and all the games in the Raybox arsenal, and if you haven't checked it out already, I've got you covered on the channel with more Stalingrad Z, Project Reza, and the fantastic Gates of Nilheim. You can also listen to the podcast I did with the creator of the game, Marco Picota. I hope you go and take a look on the Gamefound campaign with a link below, and I hope that this video helps you to start playing the game. But for now, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you here next time on Tabletop Skirmish Games.